Thanks for joining us again on TVC Breakfast Saturday. So the integration of technology in trade has revolutionized the way businesses operate, making it faster, cheaper, and more efficient. Technology has the potential to significantly boost trade by streamlining processes, reducing costs, and increasing transparency. By investing in digital infrastructure, trade facilitation, logistics, trade finance, and capacity building, African countries can create an enabling environment for trade to flourish, driving economic growth and development. Technology can also enhance trade finance and insurance, making it easier for businesses to access credit and manage risks. Joining us now for this conversation is the founder of Giri Today, Wale Ayantoye. Thanks a lot for joining us and welcome. Right, so you are a practitioner in the e-commerce field. Tell us what you think about the e-commerce environment in Africa. How is it looking right now?
Firstly, thank you for having me. I would say in the last couple of years, e-commerce has become the focal point in which African countries have the opportunity to connect. Unlike Europe, where Europe has a single market, or North America, where regulations between the US and likewise Canada is very much similar, especially around trade, and likewise the open border policy. But when you come to Africa, you realize that it's a little bit different. The policies that you experience while you're in Nigeria might not necessarily what's going to translate. You were to be in Kenya, you were to be in Senegal, you were to be in Ghana. But one of the things that e-commerce is doing today is bringing the entire continent together under one umbrella, understanding that there is more that connects us than what actually separates us. And also for African artisans, it's an opportunity to sell your products, sell whatever you have, your craft, regardless of the borders that might exist. E-commerce is more of a borderless experience where either you're selling South Africa, you're selling Morocco, and there's a buyer in Nigeria. You're able to connect using the power of AI and technology, which is the 21st century that will live as of today.
All right, talking about the e-commerce, what is that enabling environment that Africans can enjoy? Because when you look at the policies in Nigeria, it's different from that in South Africa and other African countries. How do we create that enabling environment that Africans can enjoy to have a seamless selling of products to each other?
Absolutely. I think one of the most unique things about technology is the fact that regardless of the language you speak, either your first language is Yoruba or your first language is Zulu, it doesn't really matter. That is the beauty of technology. The ability to bring different people from different ethnic backgrounds together under a single platform, under a single umbrella. And understanding that the future of global trade is there, whether we like it or not. And over time, Africa has always been the place where everybody goes to take. Here is an opportunity where we are reversing the engineering side of it, saying rather than coming to Africa to down, it is an opportunity for African artisans and craftsmanship to also have the opportunity to export globally as well with the power of technology. So regardless, think about this where either you're based in Finland or you're based in Sweden or somewhere in the world, you can actually go to an e-commerce site and you can decide to buy from African sellers locally, regardless of whichever country they actually belong. And then the advantage of e-commerce as of today also is that it solved the whole issue of currency devaluation that constantly happens, especially with African currencies. When African artisans have the opportunity to sell to buyers beyond their immediate environment, what that does is that it increases the GDPR of that particular country. Because now you're bringing money in and you're exporting the craft and the goods that you have to other countries within Africa and likewise beyond.
What's the key challenge for you in the terrain? And I don't know how that reflects on, the rest of, your colleagues in the field, but what's the key challenge with technology in the e-commerce terrain?
Some of the, number one is always data, which is always very, very essential. One thing I always say is that regardless of the machine learning technology that you might have in place, It's literally what you feed into the machine that the machine is going to learn from. In absence of structured data, that becomes a very, very challenging issue. For example, right now, if you ask me right on spot and say, how many artisans do we have in Nigeria? I can't tell you that number because I don't know if a registry does exist as of today, where those informations have been stored. And it's not just Nigeria alone, it's also the same issue across many other African countries as well. So the absence of structured data is one of the main pain points. The other one, which I don't think it's an issue right now, it also speaks to the maturity of technology within the African technology space, is around the regulations. Sometimes regulations can be a little bit muddy regarding which of the countries that you find yourself. Those are like the two major challenges that has been very, very pressing. Number one is the data, and then number two is also the fact that there is absence of clear-cut regulations within different countries. And also, if I'm to take the regulation extensive a little bit, I'll also say that the fact that Africa is not a single market has always been one of the pain points here when it comes to expansion. Because regardless of whichever countries you find yourself, you realize that you have to rewrite your entire playbook, your entire rule book, in order to accommodate the regulations in that particular country. But that's not the case if you have to operate here to be in Europe or you have to be in North America. A single rule book can literally give you the penetration to any market that you want.
All right, let's bring in your expertise into this conversation now, because if you're talking e-commerce, you should be able to tell us what you have done personally to ensure that there is transparency, because a lot of people, for them to part their money online, they are scared that I can't be defrauded again. There are a lot of people who are victims of this issue of hackers. Tell us more, your experience, and what Nigerians or Africans should look into before they go fully into e-commerce.
No, that's a very valid question, actually. By background, a huge part of my professional experience is actually built around financial crime and financial fraud. And I've had the privilege of presenting some of my findings at global fraud conferences and spoke to over 7,000 professionals, financial fraud fighters globally. And one of the most interesting pieces of it is, for me, growing up in Lagos as a Nigerian, I believe you remember the years where the ATM machine came to Nigeria, and people were told to go withdraw the money from the ATM rather than have it to the counter. An average Nigerian still go to the ATM and still count the money in order to make sure that it is complete. Every new technology always bring in those kind of trust issues. Pre-pandemic, a lot of people do shopping offline. Post-pandemic, a lot of people, the life as we know it is no longer the same. We've transitioned to online. Now, is there always going to be challenges around how the environment and the ecosystem is perceived, especially around different type of fraud, different type of data exposures? That is always a major conversation that always happens. But it always comes down to understanding this. Regardless of how beautiful your product is, regardless of how beautiful your e-commerce is, if there is absence of trust, you have nothing to sell. Trust is one of the most fundamental things. There are regulations that guide how you process and analyze people's data, from data privacy protection to Inform Act, which means Inform Act simply speaks around that if you make a purchase online from any buyer, part of their responsibility is that they're supposed to disclose their information on the receipts of what you bought, so that you can see that in your statement. There are Child Protective Act law that guide against underage selling things online. But most importantly, to come back to your questions around how do you make sure that the ecosystem is safe end to end. If you buy something, that is exactly when you're going to be charged. You were to be issued for a refund, you actually get your refund on the go. All of those have been put into consideration because we understand it. There's a lot of money you spend when it comes to acquiring a single buyer on your platform. If you lose that buyer due to the fact that either the relationship went bad, the product wasn't good enough, or there's technology, or there's data breach, you didn't just lose that customer alone. You've lost that customer and their friends and family as well. So the cost of customer acquisition is actually very expensive, and that is the last thing you want to do in order to lose those kind of people. And also the same thing goes for the sellers as well, because we have to remember, without a seller, we are non-existent. And for them, it's also very imperative that to make sure that they're settled on time, Most of these sellers are small business owners that they need revolving capital in order for them to keep that business going. So you can't hold their money for long. Another part of it also is to make sure that regardless of whatever the relationship with between the buyers and the seller, you as the platform, you're not just there to take commission, you're not just there to take profit. You're also there to bring in that seamless experience that connects buyers and sellers regardless of wherever they are globally, which is the essence of the e-commerce space.
All right. Mr. Ayantoye, Wale Ayantoye, founder, Giri today. Thanks a lot for this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.